Today, on this special edition of Let's Explore This, we are going to be discussing the rivers of Southern Appalachia. Before this episode does begin, let me first say that it is now 2026. The report for this episode comes from the annual list put out by American Rivers that brings attention to the nation's most endangered rivers. That list was released in 2025, and in early 2026, that list is going to change to bring attention to other rivers. What we must not do, however, is forget about the rivers of Southern Appalachia and what they provide for the region. From this day forward, we must continue to keep bringing these rivers the attention they deserve. You see, the rivers of Southern Appalachia, they weave a rich tapestry, one that is vital to the region's culture and economy, and one that supports an abundance of life. However, in late 2024, at the end of September to be exact, Hurricane Helene devastated these rivers and their communities with record-breaking floods and landslides. It is true that federal, state, and local partners have already allocated resources to the region. Still, there is going to be a long road to recovery and preparation for the next storm in the years to come. Together, we must continue to restore these rivers, invest in their communities, and remove unsafe dams, all to strengthen the region. So, people and businesses can thrive despite increasingly extreme weather. That means we here must all be vigilant in noticing what is going on around us. If we notice floodplains or wetlands being destroyed, then action must be taken. That is why what is discussed here should always remain relevant. Keep in mind that most of the footage for this episode was shot in the weeks following Helene. Very little footage is going to be from how it looks now. However, an episode on Marshall, an especially hard-hit town, is in the works, where more recent footage will be shown. Furthermore, keep in mind that this episode here, it focuses on those rivers most impacted by Helene, which were many. Most of the footage will be from along the French Broad, with a little bit of a couple of others thrown in the mix. So, the rivers of Southern Appalachia, they span the eastern continental divide, providing clean drinking water to over 2 million people across more than a dozen communities. From Newport, Tennessee, to Charlotte, North Carolina, these rivers are not only the environmental but also the economic and recreational drivers of the region. Overall, they are vital to the local and regional economy. The French Broad River itself holds a watershed that alone contributes over $3.8 billion annually to the region, largely from tourism and recreation. Yes, this river you are looking at, the French Broad, it is one very important river to the region. It holds a scenic stretch that provides a great trip to ride in a raft or kayak. Furthermore, it holds sections fit for tubing and does tend to nowadays be a somewhat decent river to fish. The rivers of Southern Appalachia, furthermore, are home to unique and rare species of fish like bright orange tangerine darters and southern Appalachian brook trout. Other species also do abound, such as river otter, majestic blue heron, and eastern hellbenders. Keep in mind, too, that the French Broad was once a heavily polluted river. It has for decades been cleaned up, but still does face a fair share of problems in that regard. As stated a bit earlier, as to what this episode is truly geared to focus on, in September of 2024, Hurricane Helene destroyed and devastated just about every river community in the French Broad watershed. Yes, that does include the French Broad itself, as well as the North and South Tow Rivers, the Cane River, the Nolichucky River, the Swannanoa River, and the Pigeon River. That storm also devastated communities along the Broad River, including the Green River and the Pacolet River, the Watauga River, including the Elk River, the New River, the Catawba River, and many other rivers, creeks, and waterways. The record rainfall and what came to be the largest flood in the region's history claimed 104 lives, destroyed drinking water and wastewater infrastructure, and breached dams. This event furthermore sent debris and pollution into waterways, reshaped river valleys in a landscape-scale event, and obliterated sensitive fish and wildlife habitat. So, in all actuality, it was a geologic and cataclysmic event that had massive repercussions that will be studied for years to come. Despite the risk of significant flood events, a major issue in regard to all of this is that population growth and development continue unabated. That has led to such significant levels of pollution that put several of the associated rivers on state and federal lists for polluted water bodies. This indicates they are limited in their ability to provide clean water and healthy recreation to the communities that depend on them. Yes, Hurricane Helene did cause the economic and environmental destruction. Still, how the response is handled will create the path forward for the vulnerable human, plant, and wildlife communities left in the wake of this storm. Local communities need support and partnership from each other as well as from governmental sources. The federal government has a critical role, or at least it is supposed to, in delivering resources and coordinating the response across state lines and throughout the region. Specifically, federal support is needed to address a number of issues, namely 5 important ones. Why don't we discuss briefly all 5? The first, it has to do with unsafe dams. Believe it or not, more than 44 dams failed or were damaged, leaving a trail of high-hazard dams in poor condition, which threaten communities when the next storm arrives, unless we remove those hazards from the landscape. Now, personally, I am not a huge advocate for building dams for flood control purposes. I mean, if there is enough room to build a lake, there is enough room to keep a floodplain intact. All dams really do is tell people it is okay to build closer and closer to a river. However, that is beyond the scope of this episode. Now, the second issue, it is debris. Storm debris, ranging from cars and fuel tanks to litter like plastic hanging from riverside trees and garbage along the riverfront. All that stuff harms wildlife and people. Overall, it puts the local economy from the river's recreation industry at risk. The third issue, it involves floodplains. Many property owners are eligible for voluntary buyouts to get themselves out of harm's way before the next flood comes. And the fourth issue, it involves erosion. Miles of stream banks have been scoured of vegetation and undercut by erosion. This has led to property loss as well as sediment pollution that threatens fish habitat and other sensitive aquatic life. Lastly, there is the economic development issue. Federal actions can help the regional economy, which relies heavily on outdoor recreation and agriculture, bounce back as quickly as possible. Also, federal and state parks need to be safe and open to the public. Reconstruction permit review needs to be efficient. crop and forestry support must be provided. Without the capacity to address these issues within the federal agencies, communities will continue to suffer long-term economic consequences. So, what must be done? Well, first, let me just state that there is no easy answer. It has appeared to be that many in the right places know what to do, but their efforts are often thwarted by developers. All too often, it relies on local conservation organizations to buy up the land that they can. The fate of those rivers of southern Appalachia, so impacted by Hurricane Helene, it rests on decisions that must prioritize long-term recovery and resilience funding. Mountain communities must not be forgotten and should have the capacity to address these impacts. Recovery efforts will require robust funding and staffing to ensure our region's economic recovery and to keep these communities safe during the next storm. If there are still those that say that this only happens in 100 years, you are part of the problem. If you simply state that this was a natural event, that holds a hidden inference that nothing can be done, leading to unchecked development due to popular naivety. We must bring back the health of these rivers. Regional nonprofits and local governments are poised to act as funding becomes available. Federal natural resource agencies should be prioritizing the restoration and protection of the region's rivers so that they can be resilient to future storms. Funding must be released to implement projects on the ground, including debris cleanup, infrastructure improvements, floodplain buyouts, floodplain protections, stream bank stabilization, stormwater mitigation, and dam removals. Congress should be providing oversight of the federal agencies to ensure that there is adequate staffing to effectively implement the work as directed and funded by Congress, including ensuring the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the United States Forest Service, and regulatory agencies have boots on the ground needed to respond to the needs of these communities. A failure to do so should be seen as both immoral and unethical. Of course, flooding is a problem that is not endemic to the rivers of southern Appalachia. It is a problem that is endemic to just about any river one can think of. At least, at some point in time, it will be. That is just how rivers function. Nature has designed them to flood from time to time. Simply stated, it is up to us to find a way to live in harmony with them. In the end, that should be the ultimate goal, to live in harmony with our rivers. By the way, before we do put the rivers of southern Appalachia to rest, I did manage to uncover some footage of the area from 2025. I did throw a bit of that in the mix, so after all, you did get to see some more recent footage. Furthermore, a lot of footage seen during this episode also did stem from a rafting trip I was on in the summer of 2025. Yes, it was a trip on the French Broad River, as that river is, once again, in spots, open to the public for recreation. And I imagine more of it will open up in 2026, possibly even bringing tubing back to portions of the river. But we will just have to wait and see.